issues of racism, inequality, and the gaps in our society have appropriately been elevated in our public discourse. And I know this is a big challenge for the mayor or the future mayor, but what's the business community's role in creating a more equitable Boston?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's settled science, especially and certainly for me, but I think for you as well, and the business community, that racism and inequity exists in all of the systems that we have in today's society. And we need to certainly work in partnership, as you mentioned in some of your opening comments. We need to work in partnership to make sure that every day we are focused on dismantling that and creating greater access and more opportunity for all of our city's residents, but especially those that have been greatly disenfranchised and separated from those opportunities over time. When I think about my role, my capacity as mayor of this city, and we think about the ever evolving and changing and adapting and growing business community here in the city of Boston, this is work that we need to do in partnership with one another. I'm committed to doing that. I know you are committing to doing that. And it's about making sure that industry's at the table, making sure that as a city, we're preparing for that talent to be embraced by the business community and by new industry here in the city. But if we aren't doing that work together, if we aren't collaborating and doing it in partnership, we won't ever create those opportunities, those direct pipelines to opportunity for all of our city's residents.
Yeah, great question, Jim. When I first went into government, I had committed to, in fact, making sure we did a disparity study and looked at city spending and procurement and understand what the city could do more in terms of equity and participation and helping to support small businesses owned by people of color and women. I was, successful in leading the effort of a successful disparity study that got us a commitment by the city, by the mayor, Mayor Walsh, before he left, in an executive order that at least 25% of contracts, which represent about $180 million, will go to businesses owned by women and people of color every year. It's important that the business community, I think, join in that conversation. Take a look at procurement. Take a look at, who they're buying goods and services from, and then make a commitment to diversify the businesses that they're working with. I know some have done it, Jim. I know you've led some amazing work in having those conversations as Chief of Economic Development. In fact, I took some of the language that was used by Massport to include diversity and inclusion in the evaluation of proposals for that were responding to requests for developing on city-owned land. The city now looks at diversity ownership in the same way that Massport did it under the 7 criteria to make sure that's factored in our scoring. And we need to do more of that work as government, and we need to do more of that work in partnership with our private sector.
It's substantial and it's necessary. The best thing about the city of Boston is that we do have a robust business community. Large employers, of course, across every industry you can think of, and emerging industries that are inventing vaccines. So clearly we are at the forefront when it comes to a robust economic business community. I often talk about my personal story in that, I grew up in the city of Boston. I'm a BPS kid, and I left Latin school and went to Princeton University and then UCLA for law school. And by all metrics, my life has been a total success. My twin brother, on the other hand, died 9 years ago while in the custody of a state prison when he was only 29 years old. And we both grew up poor in the city of Boston, tremendous instability in our childhood. But yet this is the city that allowed me to be successful. So I think it really demonstrates, on the one hand, we are a world-class city, but on the other hand, we do have inequities we have to grapple with. The business community, I think, has been at the forefront of ensuring that these inequities are addressed. And has a unique opportunity and role to play. Right now, we're talking about workforce development opportunities in the city of Boston. We're going to need greater investments there when you think about the number of folks who are still unemployed. Of course, when we talk about what does it mean to make sure we have a skilled, local, talented workforce that I know is important to the business community. That means investing in and working in partnership with working in partnership with our city government to improve our Boston public schools, including Madison Park, and establishing a VOTEC pathways in Boston public schools. The business community plays a substantial role, must, in helping us ensure that every family has access to affordable childcare, dealing with transportation issues, housing affordability. And I know the business community wants to play a substantial role there. And climate, of course. But the last piece I have to stress, in all of my conversations with business leaders in the city of Boston, everyone has said we want to be more embedded and more of a partner to the city of Boston in tackling all of the inequities across every system you can imagine. So I think this is an opportunity for the city of Boston and City Hall to maximize those partnerships with this incredible, robust industry that we have in the city of Boston.
Oh, the business community has a big role to play. Certainly city government, all of us have a responsibility. As you know, as all your listeners know, we have a racial wealth gap in the city of Boston that is nearly $250,000. And so it is incumbent upon all of us to ensure that we are being very, very intentional when it comes to opportunity, when it comes to access, when it comes to inclusion in our city. And you know, I have put some measures in place from city government perspective as mayor of Boston on how we can lead and do that work. And I've encouraged for the business community to join in that effort. That means everything from supplier diversity and who you do business with and how, and not you specifically, Jim, but businesses throughout the city of Boston can take this as an opportunity to develop pipelines that bring more people of color in, more women in, certainly on boards and in positions of leadership, but also who you do business with as corporations. And so we all have a role to play and certainly want to continue to do that work in partnership with you and others on this call.
You know, there's not a business leader I've spoken to or a leader at the helm of one of our large institutions who hasn't really reflected and taken the time over this last year and more of the pandemic and of our national reckoning on systemic racism to really push organizations to do more. And I think what we need in Boston is a vision driven by city government in partnership with all of our sectors and with business leaders to say, how are we not just doing our best in this moment, rising to meet the challenges and answering the call for racial justice and the deep changes that are needed, but that we're also planning ahead and looking to how we position Boston in this changing economy, in a world where the pandemic has deepened all of the racial disparities. How do we position Boston to be that city that is ahead of the curve? 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now, how are we matching our workforce development pipelines with the jobs of tomorrow? How are we ensuring that we're prepared to jump into the green economy and lead the way and ensure that those opportunities are closing the racial wealth gap in Boston? How are we stabilizing our residents with addressing the housing crisis and transportation, which are putting a burden on residents as folks are getting pushed further and further out from job centers? So I look forward to a collaborative partnership with our business leaders because we all have resources to offer. We are all trying in our respective organizations to make change, to dig down and analyze the work that we're doing, the contracts that we're giving out, the hiring practices that we're putting into place. But when we can convene and be on the same page and work in concert according to an aligned vision, we can accomplish so much more. Boston will be way more than sorry, I guess sometimes I might get my English idioms confused. Boston will be, the sum of our parts will be greater than each one of us alone could put together.